Hello and welcome to the Scanlon Leadership Interview Series, sponsored by the Scanlon Leadership Network and Foundation. I'm your host, Ron Duffy. In these interviews, you'll meet successful business leaders and entrepreneurs who talk about what it takes to become a great leader and share their experiences building effective organizations with a Scanlon plan. A Scanlon plan is an innovative leadership process for total organization development. It consists of a set of assumptions about human motivation and behavior, general principles for management based on these assumptions, and specific procedures for implementing these principles. The Scanlon Leadership Network is a nonprofit association of high-performance, values-led organizations founded by Joe Scanlon and Dr. Carl Frost. Joe Scanlon was a steelworker and MIT lecturer who in the 1950s pioneered some of the first high-performance work systems based on the revolutionary idea that the average employee wants to work and has great creativity if given the opportunity. Dr. Frost carried on Scanlon's work at Michigan State University, conducting research and installing Scanlon plans. Member organizations have won the Baldrige Award, the Shingo Prize, hundreds of supplier awards, and 5 have been ranked in the top 50 best places to work in North America. The Scanlon Leadership Network is considered one of the best-kept secrets in American business. The Scanlon Leadership Network and Foundation brings this series of interviews to you as a public service to help leaders create better organizations for workers, consumers, and investors. Scanlon, where the best ideas come together. Our guest today is Tim Tindall. Tim is the former owner and chairman of the board for Spring Engineering and Manufacturing Corporation, a design and manufacturer of assemblies, stampings, slide-formed parts, and coil springs for the automotive, computer, and consumer products industries. Prior to joining Spring Engineering, Tim worked as a teacher for several years and holds an MA degree in education. Since joining Spring Engineering in 1979, Tim has held positions including quality manager, plant manager, and vice president of operations. Tim went on to become chairman of the board at Spring Engineering. In 1990, under Tim's leadership, Spring Engineering began the implementation of a Scanlon plan, using the Scanlon Principles to guide company operations and improvement efforts. Spring Engineering has been recognized as one of metropolitan Detroit's 100 best places to work in 2002, 2003, and 2004. In 2005, the Tindall family sold their family ownership of the business to a private equity group. In this interview, I asked Tim Tindall to share his insights on leadership and utilizing the Scanlon process for performance improvement as the key values and principles for guiding his company. And now, let's begin the interview. Tim Tindall, I'd like to welcome you to the Scanlon Leadership Interview Series.
It's nice to be here, Ron. Thank you.
Tim, to start our interview off, I'd like you to briefly tell us what is the business of Spring Engineering and Manufacturing. Before you answer that, for our listeners, this was a company that you were the chairman of. Why don't you take it from there?
Spring Engineering and Manufacturing is a manufacturer of close tolerance springs, stampings, and small assemblies for the automotive sector primarily. We have about 90 employees, and we're located in Canton, Michigan, right in the heart of the automotive world. We have been in business since about 1952, a family business that was started by my father.
We're going to be focusing on the time when you were running the business and leading it. Just so our listeners know, do you have any current affiliation with the business?
No, I recently retired, sold my part of the business to a group of former Toyota executives who are taking it over as using it as a platform company to build a much larger organization.
Okay, thank you for that background. Let's talk about when you were running the business, and prior to you coming on board to lead this business. Tell us a little bit about the brief history of the culture of the business before you took it over. So this was run by your father then?
Yes, that's right, Ron. We were a typical small family-owned Detroit business where the owner was the boss. He was there every day and ran the place, and all decisions emanated from his office. My father was a fair man, but he definitely was the boss. That's the way the business ran through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I joined the company after being a teacher for about 10 years, and I joined in 1979. I joined my brother, who was also there, and we ran the company right up until the end of 1980, where he suddenly passed away, and then I took over the company in 1988 as the sole Tindall there, and began running it on my own.
When you became the sole owner and leader of this organization, I'd like you to talk about the influence your background as a teacher had on your views about leadership and running a business, and ultimately what you did about that.
Ron, I think the strongest view I had as I went into business was I never felt very comfortable in a command and control environment, and our business was more that way than certainly participative. I always felt that I was uncomfortable, and I didn't feel that was the way an organization could reach its highest level of performance. And so when I was faced with running the business on my own, I decided that I didn't have anyone else to blame if I didn't change things and made it the way I felt it should be. So I started down that path to hopefully have the business become more participative and also what I term a learning organization, where everyone is learning new things and growing.
One of the things you said to me, Tim, as we prepared for this discussion, is you said being a leader is 80% teaching. Would you say a little more about that?
Yes, I believe that very strongly, that when you are in a management position or a supervisory position in any organization, the most important job you have is making the people that work with you perform at their best, to be all they can be. That, to me, involves a great deal of learning and teaching, and it's kind of a two-way street. But I think that is one of the most important tasks, is to help people to grow.
I'm going to say I jotted down some notes about things you were saying to me that related to your view of being a leader as a lot of teaching. I think it'll just help fill in things for our listeners. This is what I'd call a semi-quote from you, Tim. I feel if people are rewarded properly, their work would flourish. Let them make more decisions. When people show up for work, I believe they want to do the right thing, and I'm looking for a better way to do this. So with that background, you eventually found yourself hooked up with a Scanlon change process, a Scanlon plan process, and you had what you called a false start, or the first attempt. I'd like you to talk about this first attempt and why you called it a false start. How did you get hooked up with Scanlon, and talk about this false start?
Well, Ron, as you just mentioned, I was searching for a way to change the culture and change the business and to become more participative, and I knew it involved gain sharing and a way to pay for performance, if you will, and other participative techniques. And I was doing some reading and research, and I came upon the Scanlon system in the writings of Dr. Carl Frost, and I got involved in that, and that made all the sense in the world to me that was a good system. And so I attempted, being a teacher, I thought I could probably do this on my own. I attempted to read my way into it and then install it in our company, kind of following the book, if you will. and went about a process of 6 or 7 months where we formed a committee and the people in the company worked together to develop a Scanlon system. We got that done in about 1989 and began using it for the next 2 years.
What happened?
Well, after about a year and a half, a number of the people in the company, both supervisors, myself, people on the floor, were commenting that, no one's behavior seems to have changed. We have this system. It was paying a bonus. People were collecting money and happy with that. But a lot of the behaviors, we were not seeing changes. We were not seeing people becoming more involved in the company on their own, more energy towards the future of the company. We saw more behavior as business as usual, come in the door and do my job and then go home. We were expecting a good bit more energy and focus on the long-term objectives of the company.
So let me try to say back to you what I'm hearing you say. You used books that you had read about Carl Frost and the Scanlon business change process, and you liked the ideas in there, and so you did your best to implement it, and a big part of that was implementing a bonus plan.
Yeah.
And as you went through this, the bonus plan was in place and happening, but the sense of dedication, the esprit de corps, the feeling that we all are really trying to pull together and be innovative and find better ways to do things, that emotional sense seemed to be absent. You discovered this by talking to some of your other managers and employees and supervisors, and you were asking yourself, what's wrong with this picture?
That's correct. What we came down to after much soul searching is we determined that when we initially installed the system, we had far too much focus on it being a bonus system, monetary reward. We thought that was important, and so we focused everyone on that. What we didn't do was pay attention to the cultural factors that support that.
And so this leads us into your second effort with implementing a Scanlon plan process. What were the things that you did different? One that you mentioned to me was you brought in a Scanlon consultant to help you understand the process and implement it. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. We, as a company, came to the conclusion in about 1991 that the plan that we had was not doing what we wanted it to do, and it was not working the way we wanted it to work. So I, fortunately, was given the name of Bill Greenwood, a consulting, a person that installs Scanlon plans. The name of his company is Greenwood Consulting in Michigan. He visited us, and we contracted with him to help us do this correctly and start again back at square one and go ahead and build a Scanlon system the correct way and see what we ended up with. And so we went down a journey of about a year with Bill. He helped us go through a path, a very structured path, where everyone gets involved and you kind of do it in a series of steps. And it culminates in a vote at the end of the year where everyone in the company decides, is this the system we want to use, and are we willing to support it? And we did do that and had the vote and had an overwhelming majority of people supported it.
Here's a couple of quotes that you've said to me that I'd like you to respond to that relate to this second effort at a Scanlon, implementing a Scanlon plan at Spring Engineering and Manufacturing. This is from you, Tim. I might not be saying it word for word, but it's pretty accurate, I hope. There's a big difference. Scanlon is not a bonus plan. Scanlon is a cultural change system. And a second quote from you. We learned that the first time we did not build a culture first. The second time we reversed the process, 90% on values, 10% on the bonus plan. So, Tim, was this change in orientation part of what your consultant Bill Greenwood was able to discern for you, or how did you come to the discovery that you had to kind of reverse the way you were putting this in?
Well, I think it came just because of what the behaviors we saw during the first phase of it. In that when a bonus was handed out, you could see people's interest in how we were doing as a company was very high the day before and the day of the bonus. And then the day after the bonus, it started to decline. And a few days after that, people couldn't tell you how the company was doing, and they probably weren't too concerned about it until the next bonus period ended, and they could stand there and maybe get some more extra money. So we pretty clearly saw that it was a motivational tool that was not working, and it really didn't motivate people. It didn't get them to become part of the company and learn about the company. So we turned it around and said, we are not going to spend a lot of time talking about the bonus. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about how we want to behave as a company, what are our values, what are the elements of this company that will make us successful, all of us, and that the bonus becomes gravy, in my mind. It's a wonderful reward, but it's not why we're in the business and why we're all there.
You're listening to the Scanlon Leadership Interview Series. I'm Ron Duffy, and we are talking with Tim Tindall, former owner and chairman of the board for Spring Engineering and Manufacturing Corporation, a design and manufacturer of assemblies, stampings, slide form parts, and coil springs for the automotive, computer, and consumer products industries. In this interview, I asked Tim Tindall to share his insights on leadership and utilizing the Scanlon process for performance improvement as the key values and principles for guiding his company. Okay, I'm going to lead us into the Scanlon principles, and I think you prefer the word values, that were practiced at Spring Engineering, and I'll name the four of them. In Scanlon terms, it's identity, competence, participation, and equity. And now, I think this is really interesting, Tim. Let's talk about the first value. In Scanlon terms, it's called identity. In your business, you found it much more practical to call it business literacy. And the key concept there is, do we know what day it is? And would you start talking about that business value and what it meant in your company?
Yes. In my mind, that's the most important principle or value of a organization's culture, and it's a foundation for Scanlon. I believe that if people know clearly what day it is, they understand what's going on in the company, what are the forces affecting the company, what are the problems, I think most people want to do the right thing. Most people want to be successful. So if you simply get people to be highly literate about the business, I think you've overcome a big obstacle, because now you have 100% of the people all understanding the problem and can make a contribution. So we spent and continue to spend a huge amount of time making sure everyone knows what's going on in the company, both from a short-term perspective, current news, current conditions, and also a longer term. We involve people in our long-term planning. Everyone understands the strategy, where we want to be 5 years from now, and they also understand what's affecting us this week as well, and how they are fitting into all that overall performance. Everyone gets a way. We try to have a way to connect the dots so everyone understands where they fit in the company and how they're impacting the company.
So everyone understood the business financials, and I'm guessing maybe you should tell us, like, well, how did a line employee learn about this? Was it at a department meeting? Was it at a special company-wide meeting? Was it talked about weekly or? Well,
it's interesting you bring that up. When we did our first go-round with Scanlon, the classic model employs teaching everyone about the profit and loss statement, literally the accounting statement. Every month gets put, and people call it open book management and so forth. And the idea is that everyone understands, everyone sees the numbers of the company. What I found in my experience was that probably 70 or 80% of the people never fully understood the accounting statements. And we tried to teach them, and we spent a lot of time doing it. Most people are not comfortable with those things, and they use terminology that no one understands. And so I felt that by doing it that way, we actually put up an obstacle. I feel that when people don't understand something, they can't trust you, because they don't really, they can't look at the numbers and say, oh, I understand that, it makes sense, it's proven out in my world, and this person's telling the truth. They can't get there. So in our second version, we said to ourselves, people need to understand the financial condition of the company as part of business literacy. They have to understand how we make money and how we don't make money. But what we did was we tried to put it in a format that people could understand. We took it out of the profit and loss statement and made it a bit simpler, a little more direct, and it was also we also focused on elements of the business that people could control themselves, as opposed to things that they had absolutely no control over. For instance, we didn't talk too much about we're going to spend X dollars on an advertisement in some magazine, because the people on board really didn't have control over that. What we talked about was things they could do. How was the quality? How was the production level? And so on and so forth. Things that they could impact.
The way you did this became very successful, and your word for it was the dashboard. Would you tell us about the dashboard, what that means, and give us a couple specifics about gauges of measurement?
Mm-hmm. Well, to put it into perspective, our system started with a business plan at the beginning of the year, and we determined and jointly determined, we had a committee on our Scanlon team, which was called ICE, and it stood for Investors, Customers, Employees. And they, with management, we jointly developed an annual plan, and we picked 7 or 8 clear measurables. We called them measurables, goals that we were going to achieve, the company was going to achieve during the year. And everyone agreed that, yes, this is what we were going to do, and this was how much we were going to move the goal and reach it at the end of the year. Once we did that and we had a plan, then month to month we wanted a way to communicate how we were doing, what day it is for everyone in the company, so they could understand were we reaching our goals or were we not. So we came up with what we thought was a pretty interesting way to do it graphically. And what we developed was, because we were in the car business, we developed a large 4 by 6 foot bulletin board graphic that looked like a car's dashboard. What we did was we taught everyone that when you drive your car, you don't just look at one gauge. You don't just look at the speedometer or the oil pressure. You look at all the gauges periodically to know that everything's going along and you're going down the road. We took that thinking and said, here's the company, here's our 5 or 6 goals, and here are the gauges on our dashboard that represent each of those measurable goals. And so we were able to, and then on each gauge, we had where the company was performing at the beginning of the year as a line, and then all the way over to the right, another line was drawn of where the goal was. And then in between that line, there were incremental movements so that we could show progress towards the goal. And then what we also did was we had a bonus system, and the bonus system was tied to achieving those specific goals. And so on the gauges, not only could the person see where the company was performing at any given moment in time, they could also see if they extended the needle up on the gauge a bit more, there were dollars attached to each increment of improvement. So if we improved 10% towards a goal, there would be an equivalent amount of money in the bonus pool that was contributed so that the employees could share. And so the more they improved, the more of a bonus allocation they were given. So they could look at this at any time during the month and know exactly where we were, where we started the year, and where we were. We also, in our gauges, showed negative performance also. And in our system, if a needle went negative and it went backwards, there was a takeaway in the bonus of an equivalent amount was taken out of the bonus availability because the performance of that gauge didn't meet expectations.
2 questions are coming to mind, Tim. One is, I'll tell them to you both, and then I'll let you decide how you want to respond. The first one is, can you share with our listeners 2 or 3 of what these measurables or what these gauges were measuring? Mm-hmm. The second thing is, if things went negative, thinking of a Scanlon improvement process and trying to improve performance, did that alarm people and go, oh, what are we doing that isn't working and how do we change it?
Absolutely. The gauges represent, as I said, different measurables that we started the year with. We traditionally had 3 or 4 measurables that were carryovers year to year. We didn't change them. They would be such things as metrics that would monitor our quality level. We had a number called parts per million. That meant how many bad parts left the business, left the company, got to a customer per million. Our company, during the last 4 or 5 years, was running at a 10 parts per million number, which is extremely good. It's world class. So we would monitor external parts per million. We'd also monitor internal parts per million. How many parts were we throwing away? They didn't go to the customer, but we were throwing them away in the company. That was an important measure towards profitability. We also watched such things as housekeeping and on-time deliveries to the customer, and also operating profit. So the financial element was always a big part. We, in fact, had a system that said if the operating profit was not there, if we didn't reach that goal, there was no bonus payout. So it was a very disciplined system that said if we didn't make money, there was no bonus, even if all the other indicators were positive. And again, I feel that teaches about business, that sometimes you can do everything right, and it's still things don't come out right. That was just a lesson that we all had to live with and learn from.
You can do things right, and things still don't come out right. Does that mean because it's so competitive or the business climate changes?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, very much so. And if I could add that too, Ron, is that this system, the idea of having everyone literate, when you're discussing what's going on in the business, and we did every month, we had a full plant meeting where everyone sat down for an hour and we talked about what was going on. In an environment that we were going through in the mid-'90s and into after 2000, very competitive. Everything was changing fast. Our customers were changing the rules faster than you could imagine, and so it was very helpful to have that ongoing dialogue with all the employees, so that we didn't have to kind of reteach everything because we didn't talk about it enough during the year. Everyone was always kind of up to speed and able to respond to a challenge fairly quickly. Okay,
in a minute or two, I'm going to move us on to one of the other values, but to stay on this business literacy value, in traditional Scanlon systems, they call it the identity. Do you know your identity? Do you know your business literacy? Do you know what day it is? Do you know what's important that makes your company succeed or fail? And you're telling us that everyone at Spring Engineering and Manufacturing had a good sense of what business literacy was and how it applied to their job and how it applied to the success of the company.
Absolutely. We made every department was connected to the business plan and to the dashboard, if you will. We not only had plant-wide meetings, but we had department meetings where, again, we connected the dots to say, in your department, here are the measurables that you need to focus on to make the dashboard perform correctly. So, again, we spent a great deal of time showing people what the behavior we were trying to achieve. And as I said, I think once people know what they need to do and you allow them the freedom to do it, they perform very well.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm picking up from listening to you, Tim, and for our listeners, this is a series of interviews with business leaders who have implemented Scanlon processes, and I've done some of the other interviews now. I am impressed with how unique the Scanlon process can be for each company. Your company made it unique. The communication system that your company developed was unique to your business, and I think that's the way this is supposed to be. The principles are the same: participation, competence, equity, and business literacy or identity, but how you implement those principles is dependent on the unique characteristics of your business, and that's what you've been sharing with us. I'm going to say a couple other quotes here that relate to business literacy that came from you, Tim. And you can respond if you want, and if not, we'll move on to talking about another one of the business principles and values. You mentioned that lack of understanding breeds mistrust. What I got from that is when you talked about the first effort to implement a Scanlon process, you called it a false start. you went after business literacy by saying, okay, folks, here's the books. Here's the accounting books. Here's these fancy accounting terms on profit and loss. Here it is. This should help you understand the important things about making our business successful, and that's what we're here to do. Guess what? They didn't understand it, and what you discovered, correct me if I'm wrong now, that for most people, you got to study that stuff to get it. So if that's not my natural cup of tea and it's really not my job, I can easily understand how that becomes hard to understand. And then what happened is people began to be suspicious. And so the leadership point here is you're making is, you know what, if you don't understand the business, if I'm not explaining it in a way that you get it, I'm creating mistrust, and I've got to deal with that.
Yes, that's great. If you spend all your time thinking you're teaching people how the business works and you're not teaching it correctly, it's not getting through to people, then essentially you're kind of wasting your time. And I'm not, I would say this, that I've always felt that the more there is a misunderstanding and people don't understand what you're telling them and don't know how to get at the truth in their mind, then you've got a breeding ground for suspicion. And I think, in the Detroit area automotive world, we've had an adversarial relationship between management and employees for a long time, and so people naturally gravitate to a kind of how is management spinning this and not telling me the real truth? How am I kind of being put at a disadvantage? And so I think once you make it very clear to people, and you can see that by the way people respond. If they ask questions and they understand, we in fact tested. We would do fun little quizzes, but it was all getting at, are people getting it? Do they understand it? And we would just do things to kind of test the pulse and make sure that, people were understanding what we said. And it wasn't traditional accounting and so forth, but it got the message across, and they understood that 2 and 2 was 4, and they understood where those numbers came from.
All right, thanks, Tim. I'm going to move us on to the other values that you practiced at Spring Engineering and Manufacturing. Would you prefer if we start with the value of participation or competence?
Oh, it doesn't matter. I think competence is fine. We can.
Okay. Here's a quote from you about competence, and to me it seems real similar to what Carl Frost, one of the creators of the concepts and materials behind the Scanlon process, would say. Quote, "We are all expected to grow and change." Would you talk about that in your company?
Well, yes, and I think that's a very important part of Scanlon. Sometimes people, when they hear about gain sharing and things like that, feel that, this is touchy-feely, it's a giveaway to the employees, it's easy on people, it's, we want you to be happy and all that. And I think one of the things you find out with Scanlon is one of the toughest cultures to work in because it's very demanding. It is just the opposite of letting you off the hook, if you will. Competence simply speaks to the idea that every single one of us in an organization is expected to grow, both professionally and personally, whether that's the new guy that's just learning how to set up a machine or somebody that runs the accounting department. And so we made it an expectation of your employment at Spring Engineering was that we expected you each year to grow, to change, to be different. Your evaluation reflected that. At the beginning of the year, you identified some things that you were going to learn or change or become in a new area, for instance. You were measured on those at the end of the year, and it was part of your evaluation. Did you display competence?
In the interest of time, I'm going to move us on to the next value and principle of the Scanlon performance improvement process. It's called participation. This is a quote from you, Tim. "Everyone is expected to help solve problems at your own level of competence. This is not a democracy. I had to learn this. People expected leaders to lead and plant employees to execute." Would you respond to that or add to it?
Yes, and I think competence and participation are almost two sides of the same coin. You're expected to, be competent at what you do. By the same token, we expect you also to actively participate in solving problems. That would be different than saying we expect you to come to work on time, do your job, and go home. So at Spring Engineering, you were expected to come to work on time, do your job, and go home, do it well, but you were also expected to go beyond that and make contributions in terms of ideas and suggestions that helped solve our problems. During our plant communication, it was very clear what our problems are. We make that an important part. Either it was a measurable for the dashboard that wasn't moving in the right direction, or it was a current issue with a customer, or so on and so forth. We were always challenging our folks to come up with suggestions. Participation meant we knew every employee had something to add. That was on evaluations for each employee. How many suggestions did you make during the year? And there was an expectation that everyone would at least make one suggestion during the year. And for the most part, that always happened. To me, the power was that if you could get all the people working on a problem that they understood and that they had competence in solving, think of the power of that versus having one person in the front office trying to solve something and everyone else waiting for him to propose the solution. We found it to be so much easier to make significant change in the business because we were able to get a lot of people working on a problem at their level of competence. And my comment about a democracy, when I first started out in looking at Scanlon, I had an envision that participative management meant a democracy. Everybody voted on everything. And we started down that road. We learned after a period of time that and Scanlon makes it very clear that you are asked to participate in your level of competence where you have influence. But we don't ask you to necessarily participate in something that you don't have competence in. So we didn't ask people to do that worked out on the plant floor to come in and evaluate the condition of our accounting system. We let the accounting people do that. And we didn't allow accounting people necessarily to go out and discuss how a machine was running. So, again, everyone was asked to contribute in their area of competence. It was not a democracy. We found also that most people in an organization have an expectation of the leaders. And that expectation is that you're there to make some general directional decisions. You're kind of pointing us where to go in the jungle. And I think most people said, that's your job, leader, to point the direction. It's our job to execute that direction properly.
There's a story you mentioned to me that I think relates to this principle and value of participation. This is a quote from you that relates to it. You said, Scanlon is the best way to get all the arrows going in the same direction. And I think you've just been explaining that there's tremendous power if you get everybody kind of thinking the same thing, focused on the same goal at their level of competence, at their level of expertise. So again, you're not talking about a democracy, but you're talking about focused contributions in an appropriate manner. And then you mentioned a story to me about some huge cost savings were needed. Do you want to mention that story?
Yes. Again, that was kind of my way of saying, getting all the arrows going in the same direction, that's a challenge in an organization. And it's been my experience being in other organizations that frequently when the leaders want to go north, you might get half the people, half the arrows going north, and then the other 50% are all going east, west, and south, depending on what their attitude is towards the company. And so you never really get that kind of focused power unless you can get 80 or 90% of those arrows all going. So we spent a lot of time hoping and developing, again, business literacy so that everyone understood we need to do this. And usually that was the case. If you give people a fairly clear explanation of the business conditions, most people will come to the same conclusion that, yep, I guess we have to go north. Mm-hmm. So we did that. We had an occasion in the late 90s where our business was becoming more and more competitive. The small manufacturer was experiencing just very difficult to be profitable at all. And so we came to our people, our committee, and said, business conditions, here's what day it is. We have got to find some very significant cost savings immediately, if not sooner, and we need to implement those. And so we need everyone in the company to go away and think about what could you suggest that we could do that would gain us some significant cost savings in a very short period of time. So they did. We put that challenge out to the company, and within 2 weeks, We generated in excess of about 250 suggestions. Some of them were small. Some of them were very large. We generated in excess, just in that round of suggestions, we had annual savings that went in excess of $60,000. It was a very successful campaign. And it wasn't a matter of, in some companies, you could have put that challenge out and you might have gotten 10 suggestions from 3 or 4 people, and the rest just ignored you. And I was very gratified. We saw tremendous participation, and everyone felt they made a contribution to helping to solve that problem.
You're listening to the Scanlon Leadership Interview Series. I'm Ron Duffy, and we are talking with Tim Tindall, former owner and chairman of the board for Spring Engineering and Manufacturing Corporation, a design and manufacturer of assemblies, stampings, slide form parts, and coil springs for the automotive, computer, and consumer products industries. In this interview, I asked Tim Tindall to share his insights on leadership and utilizing the Scanlon process for performance improvement as the key values and principles for guiding his company. Well, thanks for telling that story. In the interest of time, I'm going to move us on to the 4th value that you practiced at Spring Engineering and Manufacturing, and I guess we're using interchangeably the word value and principle. Mm-hmm. This next value is equity. Now, this is a quote from you, and I'd ask you to respond to the quote, and then soon after that, you've told me what I think was a very powerful story that happened at your company that relates to equity. It's the layoff story you mentioned to me, and frankly, I think it relates to equity. I can see how it relates to the value and principle of participation and competence. I think it flows through all of them, including business literacy. But first, here's the quote about equity. And this was your words now, Tim. Equity does not mean bonus. It means accountability for the good and the bad. It's a fair sharing of both the good and the bad.
That's correct. Many times people in reading Scanlon and reading about gain sharing, they see the term equity and they say, oh, that's the bonus. That's where the money part is. Well, yes and no. The true meaning of equity, in my mind, and as we practiced it, was fair accountability. We held everyone accountable for their behavior. And therefore, if your behavior was great and we were successful, that meant sharing the fruits of our labors, and that meant the bonus system. It also meant that if we didn't execute correctly and didn't achieve anything, that meant sharing the bad part also, whatever that was going to be, the consequences of that. Maybe a customer lowered their rating of us or canceled an order, any of those kind of things. That would be, again, an example of accountability. We had to share both the good and the bad. At the company, we taught that, and we lived by that month to month and year to year. And we had an instance that you referred to the story that we had that really, to me, pulled all the values together and really in one on one occasion. And that was, we had determined after a period of time that we were not as profitable as we needed to be, and management had to make some decisions regarding some possible layoffs. And we had never laid off anyone at our company in about 45 years, so this was a big issue. My management team, we met, and we were talking about what we needed to do long term, and we determined that we had to do some layoffs. First of all, as part of our value of business literacy, we knew we were going to do the layoffs in 4 to 6 weeks from that day, but we said, you know what, most companies don't announce layoffs till the day before and shock everybody and send them home. And we said business literacy and integrity on our part requires us to tell the employees today what's going to happen in 4 to 6 weeks. So, because we made the decision, and that's what day it is. So we took a big gulp, and we weren't sure what was going to happen when we did that, but we said we had to be honest and we had to be open because we made that decision. So we went ahead and had a plant meeting and discussed it and told people what was going to happen. And interestingly enough, no real negative behaviors that you might expect when people know something was coming, we had virtually no negative behavior. The company took it in stride. They understood it. They weren't happy, but we did the best we could. So after we made that announcement, we again met with our Scanlon committee, the ICE team, if you will, and they had met on their own and came to management and said, we have a proposal to make. And we said, what is the proposal? And they said, well, as I mentioned before, Ron, that at the beginning of the year, we set aside X amount of dollars in what I would call a potential bonus pool, that money was potentially available as a bonus. And that was a set number. And so the ICE committee knew what the number was, and they helped arrive at it. So they said, we were about halfway through the year, and we had paid some money out of the bonus. But they said, we'd like to ask this. Could we, as a company, forego the rest of the bonus? Just put it away. And if we did that, could we save some jobs? And that was their own decision. And we said, yeah, absolutely. And they said, could you tell us how many? And we came back, and I think it was 2 jobs out of maybe 7 layoffs. The company voted to give up any future bonus so that they would not have as many layoffs. So we felt that was a very good example of people taking the good with the bad. They had made bonuses in the past, so they had the good times. Here were the bad times, and how could we best get through it, being aware of other people that we work with, as well as what control we had vis-a-vis the bonus.
Well, thanks for sharing the story, Tim. I'd like to make an effort to see how all 4 values and principles fit into that story, and I'm going to take a stab at it, and you jump in and correct me if I'm wrong or add to it. But in that story, the value of business literacy comes into play in that when you told them we have to do when you and the management team said we've got to do some layoffs, you mentioned that no one really complained or argued the numbers, that they knew the business, they knew the essential financials, and they knew you were telling the truth. And so that built up trust right there. I think that's how business literacy played into that. And then participation is the ICE, which was the name of the Scanlon process at your organization, right? Investors, customers, employees.
Correct.
And
yeah,
so
we called it ICE.
ICE. And so for the listeners, I mean, if you went to this company and said, what's your Scanlon plan? Somebody might go, what? They might say, oh, ICE, you're talking about that. Participation means they speak up when they feel they want to, need to, or have something to contribute. And that is a positive thing that developed through this Scanlon effort. And so they made their suggestion in management by saying, participation is a two-way street. We are asking for your ideas on many different levels in your area of competence, and we are committing that we will listen to them. I think the story says they offered an idea, and management said, this makes sense, we're willing to do this. And it involves this concept of equity as accountability.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's a powerful story. So I'm ready to move on, but anything more you want to add there?
No, I agree, though. I think it really shows in that one incident how Scanlon can work. And again, as you correctly pointed out, too, it's not something, you don't put Scanlon in and 2 months later expect to get behaviors like that. My guess is that it's probably 3 years to build the kind of trust that we have at our company where we can go out and say things. And I think for the most part, people believe us.
Mm-hmm. Somewhere in my notes, you said what you just said to me, and I think I had a note that says, and if you stop practicing these principles and in practicing these values every day, it'll start to unravel on you.
Absolutely. I have seen that happen in other organizations, but clearly we knew that. And when we made the decision to announce layoffs, and I can't tell you how difficult that was from the point of view is we weren't sure whether there'd be unintended consequences to us announcing it early, if you will. But we went ahead and did it simply because we said we had no other choice, because the moment you start to lie or your credibility drops, it's over. And all your 3 years of good work goes out the window. That's the way we felt. We felt we had absolutely no choice but to have integrity and be credible.
There were some other measures, some stories or examples that I think go to the success of your Scanlon process, I'd like you to briefly tell our listeners about them. The first one I enjoyed hearing about from you was this study done by the University of Michigan of, I think, 10 companies, and the goal was to measure employee knowledge of the business, and the employee's knowledge of what's going on. Would you tell us that story and how Spring Engineering did?
Yes, Ron. We had been doing Scanlon for 3 or 4 years at that time, and a young man was doing a PhD dissertation at the University of Michigan Business School, and he had gotten connected with us, and he had been looking at about 12 companies in the area, and he was curious as to measuring the amount of understanding that individual employees had about their companies and how much congruence there was in terms of their attitudes. So he was surveying and finding out kind of what were the objectives of the company, and were the employees in tune with that? Did they understand it? So it was natural that he'd be interested in what we were doing at our company. He surveyed all the companies and came to me with the results, and he did them all. He went in personally, talked to people in each of the companies, and he said, I want to show you the results now. And he said, but you guys, your company is an absolute anomaly because, and he checked his results, the other 11 companies were within a band of, plus or minus 3 standard deviations, whatever that was fairly tightly grouped. And our company was about 25% above them all in congruence and people's understanding of the business. He checked his numbers 3 or 4 times. He said it was statistically very, very, very unusual, and he said you are a completely different kind of company than the other 11. He said, I don't know what you're doing necessarily, and he didn't know a lot about Scanlon, but he said, I can tell that whatever you're doing is generating huge numbers in terms of people understanding where the company's going. We hadn't done any scientific studies per se. We just said that's what we thought was happening, but there was at least some statistical evidence that it really was going on.
Thanks for that story. There's another one, Crane's Business Magazine. Would you tell us about that kind of measure of success?
Yeah, that was Crane's Business Magazine in Detroit. Started in about 1999. They wanted to develop a 100 best places to work in the Detroit metropolitan area. And they asked people to nominate companies, and then what they would do is, if a company was nominated, they would subject that company to an anonymous survey. They would get employee name lists from the HR departments, and they would randomly select employees and then send them an anonymous survey about life at the company and what they thought about it. And then they would compile all the numbers and then rate it and generate a 100 best list. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think they surveyed in excess of 1,000 or 1,500 companies in the area. We got on the list the first year in, I think it was 99 or 2000, and have been on it every year for 6 years in a row. Our company generated those kind of numbers. And I think it just was another way of saying that, management had nothing to do with that. We weren't surveyed. It was people that worked at our company, and they were basically confirming that, yes, what we were doing made it a pretty good place to work, and they liked it there.
Well, thanks for sharing those stories. I want to save 7 or 8 minutes for us to talk about the pluses and minuses of Scanlon plans and lessons learned. But just before I go there, I want you to comment briefly on 2 topics, and you can take them in any order. The first one is you talk about the triangle of customers, employees, and investors. Would you make a comment about that? And then I'll leave the second one until you're finished.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Ron. We had a logo for our thing. It was called ICE, Investors, Customers, Employees, and it was a triangle. And the employees at the company developed it and named it that way. What we felt it symbolized and how we taught from that was that we said that it's an equilateral triangle. And in a triangle, like a business like this, is that you have 3 elements, and they all must be kept in balance. And we taught that month to month, year to year. We said that sometimes the customers win, sometimes the employees win, sometimes the investors win. But all the time, we try to keep it in balance, and that sometimes you have to give up something so that the customer gets something to keep the triangle in balance, and that if one piece of that triangle gets too much, the whole thing collapses. And we felt that was a pretty, somewhat simplistic, but it was a pretty good way to discuss problems. So at our company meetings, whenever we had a tough decision to make, and we had to say we're going to go this way or we're not going to do something or we are going to do something, we always brought it to the triangle and said, okay, this decision is made and the customer wins. And guess what? The employees don't win this one. And then maybe another one, we said the employees win and the investors lose on this. So again, over a long period of time, I think that it sunk in with people, and people saw that, yes, there was a fair, we refer to it as fair and balanced. And yeah, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but overall, the good of the company and the triangle stayed strong.
You're listening to the Scanlon Leadership Interview Series. I'm Ron Duffy, and we are talking with Tim Tindall, former owner and chairman of the board for Spring Engineering and Manufacturing Corporation, a design and manufacturer of assemblies, stampings, slide form parts, and coil springs for the automotive, computer, and consumer products industries. In this interview, I asked Tim Tindall to share his insights on leadership and utilizing the Scanlon process for performance improvement as the key values and principles for guiding his company. Okay, thank you for that understanding of how that tool was used to keep your business perspective where it needed to be. Here's a couple of other quotes. This one relates to mid-level managers. This is your quote, Tim. If they don't believe it, meaning the mid-level managers at a company in the Scanlon plan, if they don't believe it, you are dead. Mid-level is the face of Scanlon.
That's very true. In terms of, and I think that applies to any system. As management, if you're trying to put in a culture or you're trying to develop a way for your company to act, I always felt that no matter what I said about it, and up in my office, what I thought about it, and thought all the good things Scanlon was doing, for example, it was totally or highly dependent on how that Scanlon system faced off to the employee. By saying that, I mean that the supervisor out on the floor or the mid-level manager out on the floor or someone who interacts daily with lots of people, they became, to me, they were the face of Scanlon. And if you didn't have those people well-educated, well-trained in how to be a Scanlon leader, then no matter what you were doing at the top, the whole thing was going to fall apart because people can hear what you say, but they look more at how does it impact them day to day. How does Scanlon touch me day to day? And that happens through coworkers and through the person that maybe is directly above them. And so we felt and we spent a great deal of time teaching leadership skills to our mid-level people so that they would be good Scanlon servant leaders.
Okay, as a last topic area for conversation, let's discuss lessons learned from implementing a Scanlon plan at Spring Engineering. So I'm asking you, Tim, to kind of summarize what you think the pluses are, having been a leader using the Scanlon process at your company, and also what the minuses might be. In preparation for the interview, you and I together came up with some notes or points we wanted to emphasize. I can mention those to you to get you going, or I can just leave it to you to start talking about maybe the pluses first.
Well, I think we've touched on a number of them without hoping not to be too repetitious, but I think in general the pluses are that it truly, I think, Scanlon maximizes organizational participation and focus. I think clearly it is the best way to get people organized to get something done. Now, the U.S. Army may not agree with that, and there's other ways to do it. But I think for a business, and for me, this is the correct way to do it, and it's a positive environment. I also think that business literacy again, is the foundation, that if people understand what day it is, they will generally come to similar conclusions and do and support activities that you need to do.
And so as a positive consequence of business literacy, you get very low, what you would call negative behavior from your employees.
Right. My sense is that in a typical business, you have about 20 or 25% of the people who are actively participating in trying to make things better. And then you have a chunk in the middle, maybe 40% or 50%, who are neutral, who will do what they're told and come in and work hard every day, but they're not overly active. And then you have a group who are almost negative in their behavior, and they have either adversarial relationships or whatever, and they almost demonstrate negative behavior, so to any specific goal or activity. And I think in our company, we clearly saw that the number of people that actively participated was certainly more in the range of 40 or 50% of the company, and then there was a significant group of neutral people, again, would do a good job, not necessarily as active as some of the others, but still do a very good job. And then I think we only had maybe 5% of the people who I would have called, and I wouldn't even term them negative behavior. I just knew them as people that I was never going to win over. And I had longtime employees who didn't do anything malicious to the system, but I knew in their hearts they never bought it.
Mm-hmm.
By the same token, interestingly, we would encourage people to leave if they were uncomfortable and they didn't want to do participation and competence and be asked to do those things. And we had many people that said, "Hey, I just want to come in and do my job. Leave me alone." So we encourage them to say, if this isn't comfortable for you, the best decision you can make is maybe find another place to go where those things are not asked. And that was that. And we had people leave. We also had people leave and come back, and we called them boomerang employees. I can think of about 5 in the period of 8 years where people left the company, said this wasn't the place for them, they didn't like our company, and they found something better, and 6 or 8 months later, we're knocking on the door saying, could I have my job back? Could I come back because the other company wasn't what I thought it was, and now I see what you're doing, and I appreciate it a bit more. And we, of course, welcomed them back because they were our greatest proponents for new employees to listen to. They would speak the praises of Scanlon with much greater credibility than a lot of other people. So we were happy to have them back. They became usually highly contributive members because they had learned a lesson, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. There's a couple other things I'll just mention that I think fall under the pluses category, and these are from your notes, Tim. Let's see here. Allows and encourages professional and personal growth. This is an interesting one to me. Identifies and encourages leaders at all levels.
Yes, and again, that's part of competence. We ask people to become leaders, and in many cases, I can think of lots of people out on the floor who took on leadership roles, and you would never have thought ever that they would do that, and they did it, and they flourished. And so it was amazing. Once you give some people enough knowledge that they understand what they're supposed to do, there are many leaders out there who go undiscovered until they're given the right chance and the right atmosphere in which to blossom. So we saw that. And one of the other things that we didn't touch on, and I think it exemplifies the power of the culture, was that in our company we went for a period of time in the late 90s, early 2000, our financial condition was just getting really bad and very difficult times. We were performing very well. We were well thought of, but our customers were not allowing us to make a profit, and it was very difficult. So we went for 3 years without ever giving a bonus to anybody. And the test to me was that our measurables, our performance measurables, never degraded. In fact, they got better. We maintained a 10 ppm, parts per million, quality rating, which, as I mentioned before, was world-class. We maintained that throughout that 3-year period when no bonuses were being given out. You would have expected, in a lot of companies that have a bonus system, without the culture, if the bonus system stops, so does interest, so does activity. In our company, we saw that clearly was not the case. It sustained itself because it was built more on the other values. We challenged our people on our ICE committee. We said, you know what, we're not going to pay any money this year. The money's not there. Business literacy, what day is it? But by the same token, we challenged them and said, you guys need to figure out ways to make the company, to keep the company eyes on the prize, what's important, and keep them excited. And so they came up with all sorts of recognition systems and awards and fun things that we did every month to kind of take the place of the bonus check and still keep people excited and positive towards the system. And I think that, combined with the culture foundation that we had laid, allowed us to move through that 3-year period without a degradation in performance behaviors.
And now, when we talk about lessons learned implementing the Scanlon process, what would you say about the minuses?
Probably the number one thing is Scanlon is, I hate to say it, but Scanlon is very hard to do. It requires a lot of attention, and it requires patience, and it requires consistency over a long period of time. That's difficult in the kind of world we all live in now, where things get changed and people are pressed and stressed and they don't have time to do some of these things. Scanlon requires a lot of that. I think it's easier to run a command and control company and not pay attention to these other issues. So it's more difficult, but I think the rewards are there.
Let me stop you there so I understand that. Scanlon, your words are Scanlon, the Scanlon way, it can be very hard. It might be easier to run a command and control. Is this correct, though? In the Scanlon way, your chances of having high performance are quite good and having everyone on board with the right attitude, really all oars pulling the same way, increases. Command and control, you might, if things go bad, it might go bad real quick. You might not get as good a performance. I mean, is that why you do Scanlon?
Yes, I think so. I think that for most organizations, if you have the time and the patience, this is a better way to organize people. You know, most people, if you look at that, if you look at the principles, they all make sense. I don't think I've ever had anyone describe, when you describe Scanlon and describe the principles, everyone says, well, yeah, that makes total sense. Why doesn't everyone do that? I don't think I've ever found a condition in the business, a time in the business, where the values didn't see me through, where I used to say it provided us with a corporate compass. Mm-hmm. It told us, okay, we have to do it this way. There was no debate. And it made life a lot easier in some respects because we knew what we had to do to be consistent. So in some respects, it's a very clear way, and most people respond to it in a very positive manner because it's basically how you would like to be treated.
Mm-hmm. And because it's good, it doesn't. Most things in life, if they're good, doesn't make them easy.
That's right. That's right. And sometimes it's easier to just run out and tell somebody what to do and not get into a discussion back and forth or tolerate things. You know, people asking you questions and all that. It's easier to just demand performance. But I think those kind of systems are very fragile.
So last question for you, Tim. You have a note here. This is a comment from you. The longevity of a Scanlon process is highly dependent on the top management leader. Yep. Would you comment on that?
Yes, and I think that, you know, as maybe one of the, and I'll tie that in with also one of the minuses. One of the things that we experienced is that Scanlon also demands that leaders be leaders. By that I mean leaders, to me, have to be vulnerable and have to be open to questions. If you're the type of person who does not like to be challenged, you would be very uncomfortable in a Scanlon system because we expect people in the plant to ask questions. And sometimes I was asked very tough, almost embarrassing questions, if you will, from employees who felt comfortable to bring it up. So our leaders, myself and the other people who were leading the company, we had to be willing to sit through that and give answers with integrity and openness, and sometimes be also accountable for mistakes we made to the plant, to be out there and say, guess what, we screwed things up and we have to change direction now and do it this way. And sometimes that's not easy, but I think if you don't do that, you won't get the other, the system won't work because you're not doing your part as a leader. People expect you clearly expected us to earn our paychecks and lead and provide decisions and policy and then stand behind them.
One of the potential downfalls of a Scanlon process is if another leader comes in and they go, I've got a better way, and we're going to do it this way, and the work for participation, for competence, for equity, and business literacy isn't on that new leader's agenda, then this will kind of dismantle, and that's a sad thing.
Right. We've seen that in the Scanlon Leadership Network. We have always analyzed why companies became part of Scanlon and then left and changed. For the most part, you saw that as it was a leader who was driving the Scanlon process, who was dedicated, committed to it, and then he developed his company around that commitment. But for the most part, it was very much driven off a leader. We saw that at our company, and I had 4 young men who were investor managers who I brought in because I didn't have any offspring to hand the business down to. We made a very, very concentrated effort to make sure that the 5 of us, we went to all sorts of Scanlon training and discussion and retreats so that we would be all on the same page, so that I knew that when I stepped out, the system would be secure relative to those 4 guys because their belief system was the same. And so that we spent a lot of time with that because clearly Scanlon is driven from the top. And if top management is not committed to it, and say mid-management is, it's very difficult to do because they won't make those kind of decisions and commitments.
One other thing to ask you about. You mentioned informal, on my notes here, it says informal phone calls. That was one of the benefits about the Scanlon Leadership Network.
Oh, yeah.
Could you comment on that? That'll be the end of our interview.
Yes, and really that was probably one of the most important things in my ability, my success is to getting this thing developed, was that I joined the Scanlon Leadership Network, our company and myself, and basically what that provides is you are now in a group of other company leaders who are all believe in the same kind of thing, believe in Scanlon, and are extremely open and willing to help each other. So that meant instead of me sitting in my office staring at the wall wondering what to do about a typical problem, maybe that I was struggling with that had to do with Scanlon, I could pick up the phone and call another person who may have been running a much larger company than our little 90-person company or a much smaller company, but maybe who had been through some experiences like I was going through and could give me some fatherly advice and help in dealing with the problem. And I used that on a number of occasions, and vice versa. I had people call me asking my opinion on something they were struggling with. And so it is probably the most powerful tool. Anyone going down the Scanlon road, they need to become part of that because it is a wonderful support system.
All right, Tim, thank you for sharing about your experience leading the Scanlon way at Spring Engineering and Manufacturing. Before we end our time together, any things that we didn't discuss that you would like to, that you wished we had talked about?
No, I think we covered it all. It was a pleasure going through it. I know we covered a lot of ground, Ron. I can only say that I hope people benefit from listening to these conversations. I know that when you told me about this process that we were going to do these podcasts, I was thrilled and wished they were around 15, 18 years ago when I was noodling on this, because listening to someone else who'd been through it would have been very, very helpful and probably saved me from making so many mistakes as I did.
And so your hair would be less gray, huh?
Or there'd be some up there.
Well, Tim, thank you very much for being with us for the Scanlon Leadership Interview Series.
Ron, it was a pleasure to talk to you.
You've been listening to one of the Scanlon Leadership Network interview series. I'd like to thank our guest, Tim Tindall, for being with us. This interview series about leadership and Scanlon business principles is brought to you by the Scanlon Leadership Network and Foundation, a nonprofit association of high-performance, values-led organizations. Scanlon, where the best ideas come together. For information on the services offered by the Scanlon Leadership Network, visit their website at www.scanlonleader.org. That's on the web at scanlonleader.org. Scanlon is spelled S-C-A-N-L-O-N. Or call 517-332-8927. That's 517-332-8927. That's our interview for today. The great Scanlon leader, D.J. Dupree, taught us that every meeting with another human being should be what he called a fortuitous encounter. We are all children of God. We all have competencies and talents. The fact that we came together should make a difference. Here's wishing that all your encounters are indeed fortuitous. I'm Ron Duffy, and on behalf of the Scanlon Leadership Network, thanks for listening.